an intro video for us. Hey, welcome to Talking Niagara with Peter Giblett and Dave Wheeler. Morning, Dave. How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you very much. I think I'm awake. I don't know if I'm dreaming or I'm here.
Yeah. All right. So there's a viral video out there about these Canadian landlord evicting an Indian tenant. So the tenant, I said Indian tenant, I meant tenant of Indian origin, right? The tenant is protesting that, hey, I've still got 2 more days to move out, and the landlord is, landlord is basically just packing him up and moving him out. Couple of things to note on here. Well, unless you committed a criminal offence in your, if you turned your apartment into a drug factory, the police can throw you out. Or if you'd committed a criminal act in the thing, you can be evicted by the police. But apart from that, you can only be evicted by authority of the landlord and tenant board. So there's no indication here as to whether that was a landlord and tenant board, adjudication, eviction, or whatever. But the tenant is protesting they have a few more days, and the landlord is kicking them out. Well, landlords are not allowed to kick people out. It's only sheriffs that are actually allowed to physically remove a tenant from a unit. So there's a couple of odd things here going on, and it's not doing us good in the world of viral videos.
Yeah, the truth of this, it looks kind of genuine though. I don't know where they're throwing them out. Maybe they're throwing them out of a hotel room or something like that. Maybe it was something different, but it looks it looks like there was no acting here. The way the guy was talking and everything like that. And I'm not even sure that it was. And somebody says it's probably not Brampton. Of course, it's gone all over the place. Now, there's something I have to ask you here. I've seen a fair amount of these little videos by Indians saying that Indians are now unwelcome or less welcome in Canada and the United States.
I wouldn't read it as that. I would never seen, I see Indians taking part in Canada, in things in Canada.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just that I've seen videos in that they suggest that Canadians or that Indians are becoming less welcome. They were fairly well. I guess Canada's got a very good reputation of tolerance and accepting more than other countries, different people from around the world. We find that although I find that there was these little videos out there stating that by Indians stating that Indians are becoming a little less welcome in Canada and the United States. I'm not so sure that that's really the case.
Trouble is, you can read so much into a video like this, can't you?
Well, it's not this video; it was other ones, right?
Yeah.
And then, and I think that's the reason why it became viral in India.
Yeah.
Why this particular video became viral in India, because of course there's lots of tension among a lot of the Indian population that came here as students or workers, and now they're going to have to leave. And I think that a lot of that will be misinterpreted as anti-Indian sentiment. Do you think that that's possibility?
Well, that's always possible. Yeah, absolutely, that's always possible. But generally speaking, I'd say most Canadians are welcoming of newcomers.
Yeah. So basically, I really can't. I don't have that much problem. My only problem is, of course, is how many immigrants can we take? How many students can we take? Those practical things that are interfering with, but have nothing to do with Indians per se. It has
No,
a lot to do with
just
foreign
immigration
students
generally.
or
Yeah,
immigration in general.
yeah, yeah. It's not anti-Indian. It's the Indians just happen to be amongst the members of a bloc, which is those foreign students that people certain people have determined are abusing our system.
Yeah, there's more. It appears to be more Indians than others. I think probably because of the way in which they've been recruited in India. Because there's lots of connections for Indians here, whether they're Sikhs or Indians or I don't know. I don't really see a whole bunch of Pakistanis coming in. It always seems to be Indians, and I would have thought that there would be at least a similar number of Pakistanis because we have the same sort of connection with Pakistan as we do with India. It's very similar through the British Commonwealth. We've had a lot of Pakistani immigrants in times
Yeah,
past.
but Pakistan is about a third of the population of India or less, and doesn't, and there's probably therefore they'd be a third of that Indian population that we see.
Yeah, the one person I did talk to was Pakistani. It was like the ones that are Pakistani usually come via another place, like Qatar or Abu Dhabi or something like that, or Kuwait.
Mm.
In any case, so that particular, it's very unlikely that somebody could come in and throw your stuff out.
Yeah.
That guy was maybe just reclaiming something that the guy had bought and hadn't paid for or something. It could be anything, but it's stuff like this that gets everybody weird. Nobody there's not much explainers on that.
Yeah, there's nothing great explaining on that, and there's a guy carrying already boxed up stuff. The boxed up stuff looks as if it's brand new, so it could be repoed by a store, as you say.
Yeah, I say it could be a hotel room, could be anything, or it could be I don't know, but in something like that can get everybody's nose out of joint.
Yep. Yeah.
And sometimes it's irresponsible to put stuff up there like that.
Yeah. Okay, the next one, Jill Dunlop is refusing to acknowledge that there are sexual and physical abuse problems, mismanagement within Ontario schools for the deaf and blind, but she didn't rule out the possibility of a provincial inquiry into the troubled system where there's been, particularly on those schools where there has been allegations of abuse and discrimination.
Now something must be going on because the Ontario government has paid out $23 million in hush money. So there have been previous illegal action taken against the schools and the abuse that has happened in the schools for the deaf and the blind. And if they forked over $23 million and they're supposed to shut up about it, then it's obviously something's going on.
Yeah.
Now it seems to be unconscionable here that the minister is actually kind of poo-pooing it, but saying, "Oh well, maybe we'll have an inquiry," and talking as if the opposition are just talking opposition rhetoric. We're talking about abuse of
when
children.
It comes to, if you were talking about a few thousand paid out in legal settlements, you'd be saying, well, we got a minor problem and maybe they've dealt with it. But when it's 23 million to settle lawsuits, that's a big problem.
Yeah, So what is it? It seems to be that there is. I think I wrote it down. Yeah, it says that the lawsuit that happened back in 2016. Um, it was about approaching students with contempt, prejudice, indifference, and abuse, and that cost the province $23 million. What's going on, Peter? Why is the government sort of uh, putting a little bit of a nonchalance on this and saying that the complaints that's coming from the other side of the aisle are just political rhetoric? It seems to me that if you wanted to talk about do political rhetoric, it wouldn't sound a whole lot like things about abused children, would you?
Well, abusing children is, and particularly those that suffer, that are disadvantaged, like deaf and blind kids, is a problem in our society that we should be taking very seriously. And I think the question is that, why aren't we taking it seriously? And why haven't we been taking it seriously? Because that sounds like as if it's a problem that's well before the Ford government came in.
Yeah, it says there have been serious allegations of abuse and discrimination at these schools. They are underfunded. There are serious teacher shortages. It goes on to talk about the equipment and the schools themselves being kind of dumpy. That the
Yeah,
schools are like old and out of date. Working, it says the buildings, there are crumbling, unsafe buildings. I can show you pictures, so can the teachers who work in these buildings. If you're willing to meet with them, will you do what your predecessor refused to do and call a provincial inquiry into the conditions at these schools? Now, initially, Dunlop responded with the same party talking points, Lecce in response, and so on and so forth. Uh, the provincial demonstration, it's called the Provincial Demonstration School Branch, has 7 schools across Ontario responsible for children who are blind, deaf blind, or have other special needs. Now, I can who the hell are abusing children like this? I can see some of the children, whether they're deaf or whether they're blind or deaf and blind, could be, uh, you know, could be misbehaving. Kids misbehave. Kids are kids.
yeah.
So you could get a
And
misbehaving deaf
kids,
kid or blind kid.
well, and kids that have got deafness or blindness also misbehave because they are different than other kids. They have particular problems.
I suppose so, but in a particular place like that, they're in among other people exactly
You,
like
yeah,
themselves.
Yeah, but you would expect them, yeah, that's a positive thing, but also you would expect them to have more specialist teachers that would understand those difficulties.
I suppose, but are they talking like regular? If they put a deaf kid into a corner because he or she's been misbehaving, or however, whatever the disciplines they use these days, um, would that be considered abuse? Um, I don't think so, because there's one girl here they're talking about having had physical abuse, and to this very day still has uh, lightning in her head. She calls it. Uh, and here it says here, I'll go back to my quote before: contempt, prejudice, indifference, and abuse, and alleged ongoing sexual, physical, and emotional abuse by students by their peers, teachers, and counselors.
Yeah,
It sounds terrible.
it does. And is the author though being over dramatic in the words that they use?
This comes from the pointer, so
Yeah,
possibly, or maybe he's just quoting. Well, he's simply just quoting. In that particular case, it was quoting someone else. And there was and they do go on about one of the children and how this one here. Um, Let me see her name here. Let's just call her Jane. When she was 13, according to the evidence in an ongoing lawsuit, Jane was violently assaulted at her PDSB school, leaving her with a traumatic brain injury and what she described as lightning in her head. But it doesn't say who. It was another kid? In a
Yeah.
statement of claim, Jane and her parents alleged repeated assaults against her by fellow students. Administrators allegedly hid information about these assaults from the police and refused to conduct necessary medical assessments to provide Jane with care that desperately needed, leading to misdiagnosis and years of mental anguish, culminating in her attempted suicide multiple times. Well, this was a. It says it looks like here. So it looks like it was abused by other students, and why the teachers would want to cover that up, uh, I don't understand that at all. I don't understand why the teachers would want to cover something up. I mean, kids abusing other kids, that's as old as school itself. But anyway, whatever it is, I hope they get to the bottom of this. This sounds absolutely terrible, and it's quite a stain on Ontario's education system, if you ask me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They have to get to the bottom. Like crumbling old buildings and bad. Come on, kids are kids. They should have like a nice school to go to. I think it's bad enough that they're separated from the mainstream kids as it is, but it can't be helped maybe because they need special attention. But I would rather have them come to regular school at least part of the time, that they go to the education centers for the deaf and the blind and all that for maybe half of their school or three-quarters of the school, and actually interact with other kids that aren't disabled. I think it would be better in my and I really can't put my head around what kind of teacher would abuse
Yeah.
children like that.
Okay. Mike's saying Stanford School had a lockdown yesterday, a fight with weapons involved.
Oh
Okay.
Jesus!
Yeah. All right. And Peter Baker is also saying it's time for body cameras. Is it time for body cameras for all our public employees? That's an interesting question. Is it their system to uphold? It's their system to uphold and benefit from. They should be completely accountable during their performance on the job. And I agree, they should be accountable for their performance on the job. And start in some respects, we need to start carrying cameras around when we attend, public places.
Well, you got to be careful because there was I think it was a council meeting of some kind, and I remember reading it. Unfortunately, I can't remember the place, but one of the councilors went to the bathroom with his mic still on, and it was live. And
Yeah.
of course, the when the rest of the council meeting was going on, but they were treated to the sounds of him going to the bathroom. So you got to be very careful what you do. Anyway, there's a question I would like to ask everyone here. Uh, Pierre Poilievre made a big deal about anti-Semitism yesterday on the October 7th and the rising anti-Semitism, and so I think did Trudeau. I like to ask anyone here: have they noticed any rising anti-Semitism? I have not noticed at all. And they keep talking about this huge wave of new anti-Semitism, except when I just looked in an article, it now includes anti-Zionism. Well, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Any of
There are
you?
plenty of Jews that are anti-Zionist.
I've heard anti-Israeli. I've heard anti-Zionist. I've heard anti-IDF. But I don't hear the old-fashioned anti-Semitism anywhere.
No.
Of course, there's going to be all kinds of. If you're a Palestinian or something like that, you're going to be anti-Jewish probably, but the but the but the Jewish guy you're being anti-Jewish with would be anti-Arab. So that's kind of anti-Semitism too, in a sense, because Arabs are Semites. But aside from that, where does the hate begin and end? There's a lot of Islamophobia, but there's also among Israelis, as we've seen in the news, there's a lot of anti-Palestinian that is similar, very like might as well be anti-Semitism against Arabs, sort of. It's exactly the same thing, a hate and unrealistic hate for a member of a certain ethnic group.
We have too much of that. We've been, that ever since 9/11, we've actually had a lot of anti-Islamophobia around the place.
Yeah, I would say that that's more of a growing problem than anti-Semitism. Now, anti-Semitism is one of those things that we have to lock it into mostly European background. Jews, for the most part, were treated much better in the Arab and Muslim nations as they were in the Christian nations, because among Muslims, Jews and Christians are called people of the book, and they're required to have some respect, where that doesn't happen in Christian faiths, where Jews and Muslims are thought to be infidels, kind of thing. Now, but this conflating now, but it always comes with this: whoever's making the tally has changed the rules, and they're saying this anti-Zionism is included, and yet I rarely hear anything against Jewish. In fact, if I know any Jewish people, I probably don't even know that they're Jewish. Because they just kind of fit in. I don't know. But anyway, that's a question I'll leave for the other day. But I like to everybody to kind of think, how much anti-Semitism have you actually heard, or even on TV? And I haven't really heard a whole lot. The real anti-Semitism that scares me the most is the kind of the Nazi right-wing jackbooting type of dude blows up a synagogue or something like that. Anyway, I'll just leave that with you. What's our next story, Peter?
Yeah. Well, the next story is this question about mental health workers who didn't recognize their own declining mental state.
Yeah, as I said yesterday, I wasn't prepared to talk about that yesterday. I hadn't read it well. And I wanted to look into it a little bit more. Now, this story is about mental health. Actually, she's a professional. She's a social worker.
This is actually it's a first person column written by a social worker living with OCD in Ottawa.
Yes, it's taken her. The reason why she wrote it is because she's taken. It took her a long time to self-diagnose or help diagnose that she had OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
And now, normally, when you think of obsessive compulsive disorder, it'd be like that guy Sheldon on Big Bang. Was that called Big Bang? The show he's on?
Yeah.
Big Bang, where he knocks 3 times always. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It always has to be 3. People who won't step on cracks on sidewalks. People that just keep going back to their house to check to make sure they didn't leave the coffee pot plugged in, but they might do that 2 or 3 times. That kind of thing. That's obsessive compulsive disorder. But she discovered that her obsessive compulsive disorder was in her mind. It was part to do with her imagination, how she just kept replaying ideas and thoughts.
She talks about being scared and having dark and being tortured by dark thoughts.
Yes, and how they keep reoccurring, and how she has to get a hold of it.
But
So
again,
this was
does that mean that she's actually? I get the impression, though, that whilst I have to question. Everybody is scared and tortured by dark thoughts from time to time. Is she basically saying that this is something she always gets every day? But because if it is, she also seems as if she's managing to control it.
Yeah, so that's her whole point. How she's been able to now identify it and control it, because OCD it's a common sort of mental disorder that is out there. It's one of the most common ones, and it in her case it manifests itself in her thoughts, not her physical actions. So the same things that scare she, for instance, talks about when she was a child that every day after school her parents came to pick her up, but every day she would go through the same panic that her parents had forgotten her and never going to come and pick her up. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, after 1 or 2 or 3 days, you don't have that anymore. But she kept having it over and over and over every day. So that is obsessive compulsive disorder in a mental way. Now, the reason why I wanted to carry on with this is because I wanted to know the common mental health disorders. Now, OCD is one of them. Now, a full 18 to 20% of Canadians have been have these disorders to the point where they could be diagnosed, and these are them: depression, generalized anxiety disorder called GAD, panic disorder, phobias, social anxiety disorder. Social anxiety disorder is like being shy to the power of 10, to the exponent 10. Nearly a full 20% of Canadians have this at the diagnosed level. And I wanted to know how many of us have this to a lesser or greater degree in our society. Go ahead.
So then there's always a flip side to this, is that we seem to have a number of, let us call them modern afflictions that seem to be more afflictions of the mind than they do afflictions of the body.
Oh, sorry. Here, these are the ones that, yeah. Oh, yeah. And FOMO. FOMO is another one of those kind of things. Now, which is fear of missing out.
Yeah.
So these, now I would think that just about everybody that lives has some element of these. Oh, I will flip back to
exactly. Fear of missing out in terms of, well, where is everybody? I didn't get the memo about us not being into work today.
Yeah, I should just flip back to the other one, the young lady who had the OCD, the obsessive compulsive disorder that manifests itself in her thoughts and ideas, repetitive thoughts and ideas, dark ones. We have to remember too that there is a very famous person that suffered from depression. Probably did not know it as clinical depression back in those days, but it was Winston Churchill, who had very dark moods and was near crippled by depression, and he called it black dog. That it came over him, and he called it, that was his nickname for it, black dog. Just sort of overwhelmed him. So the idea that I think, and I'm wondering how much of this is continuing and how much of it is growing. Is this normal to have 18% of your population throughout time in these categories of depression, centralized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, phobias, social anxiety? And is it and social media causes anxiety, depression, loneliness, and FOMO? Is it because of the media right from when we began to get radio, basically mass media, radio and television and that
Well,
kind of thing.
as I
Is
say,
it
there
part
are.
of the cause?
You just gave the example of Winston Churchill, and Winston Churchill, um, it's a clear example of somebody having gotten through a particular thing that affected them. And, this is something that they've overcome, something that's made them essentially got them onto a path of greatness.
Possibly, but yeah, well, yeah, he was able to overcome it, but he was an exceptional man.
Yes.
What about the rest of us? I
But
think the
don't we
rest
all
of us
go through?
should
You see,
really
don't
look
we all
at
go through?
ourselves. Go ahead.
Don't we all go through problems? You come out of school and you go to an interview to try and get a job, and it's like, well, you don't get that job, and you don't get the next job, and you don't get the next job. It's because you don't have experience. It's not because you don't have talent. It's because you don't have experience. But how do you get experience without, and you've got this whole, and that could become quite a mental imposition.
Yeah, it could be, but these are mental now. Okay, yeah, you could get into a pretty low place if you keep failing.
Yeah.
But usually,
And also
if
the
you
other,
do not have, those are temporary. Those are temporary things, like when you're sad when your cat dies. You're very sad for a couple of days. You're in a bad mood. That's quite a bit different from from depression, where you could
yeah.
be sad for weeks and months for no particular reason. And
And
there's
you
quite a bit
see,
of difference. So if you fail getting job after job after job, sure, of course you're going to be depressed, but it's not a disease. You'll bounce back.
yeah. Well, the other thing is that, and again, another example that I've got is that I knew this gentleman one time. He said he heard this girl liked him, and always liked this girl. He'd heard, he heard from a reliable source that she liked him. This is something he was in his 20s. So in the bar one night, he went out and, where she was with her friends. Um, he went over and plucked up the courage. He went over and asked her out on a date, and she laughed at him and said no. Right, and later on, she met him like when he was in his 40s. Later on, and she said, "Why didn't you ever ask me out on a date?" And she said, He said, "You humiliated me. I'd heard you liked me," and she said, "I did. I always liked you." But you laughed at me at the bar, and that caused me I've never had a relationship with any woman ever, is what he said, because it caused psychological disorder in him.
Well,
He
sure, but that's
clearly
not
had a
normal.
problem.
That's not normal, and that's kind of the thing
Yeah.
you're talking about here. The psychological disorders, the mental health disorders. That would be one of them.
Yeah.
Obviously, he overreacted. He couldn't get it back.
Yeah.
That may have caused him generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD, where he then would not approach another woman thereafter. But that's an extreme case,
It is.
and
It is. He
so
admits
typically
it's
that doesn't
extreme.
happen to every person.
Yeah, he
Obviously,
admits it's extreme, but you could see him in a room in a meeting. If a woman got up and spoke, he cowered away and kind of looked the other way.
well, that's obviously a mental health disorder,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering here though about. Of course, he had an extreme one there. I'm wondering here how many people are dealing with mental health issues. Uh, I think that although they're 18 to 20% of Canadians, which is like 1/5, have these disorders where they are diagnosable. I'm wondering how many of us have different degrees of that and haven't been able to approach it, or haven't to come to terms with it.
Yeah.
We're often told these days that smiling, happy person over there could be dying inside. That's
yeah,
just a
yeah.
mask for their depression. And we can see, well, look what happened to Robin Williams, right? He killed himself, and suicide. So this funny, outgoing, happy guy on the outside was dying on the inside, and actually ended up just killing himself. That's how bad it is. So my point here when getting into this was how many of us do these are the ones I read off here are the most common mental health disorders. How many of us have degrees of that of those, and should we really uh, have a very good look at ourselves and maybe deal with the world understanding our own? Do we have a little bit of social anxiety disorder? Do we have a depression? um, there is a lot of depression out there, and that's all a lot of it covered up. Panic disorder. I know people with panic disorders. I mean, I know people with panic disorders that are the toughest, meanest dudes, and every once in a while they get a panic disorder where they become afraid of nothing in particular, and it just is. So that's my whole point of getting into this, was just to understand how many of us are suffering this way. And I looked into social media and television and that to see if it was a contributing factor. And it seems that, of course, it is. And as I said before,
Well,
social media
yeah.
brings on anxiety, depression, loneliness, and FOMO. What social
But
media does puts us into a box and puts
yeah.
a person's face up there on TV, and
Well,
it's not a real image.
you see, there's positives and negatives about social media. You and I couldn't do this but for the advances in social media over the last few years, and we wouldn't be able to do a thing like this. The most we would be doing would be we'd be chatting in a coffee shop or something of that nature. We wouldn't be we wouldn't be um on a show, having our say on a thing like Facebook. And I think we all have a certain amount of degrees of mental affliction. Even those of us that seem fairly normal have got our problems deep down somewhere, but we keep them buried in somehow, right? We've got these defense mechanisms in ourselves that keep us and help us hide that stuff.
Well, I think in my opinion that social media and modern living is causing more and more psychological disorders, and bringing those that are latent up to the surface. And I think that yes, so there are good and bad things about social media. Like, we're on social media now, so my suggestion to everybody is shut off the rest of social media and just watch us.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Oh, there's
okay,
another thing I'd like to point out here. I forgot yesterday. I said that my Kiwanis Staples donation drive got 7,579. No, it was $9,579. Sorry about that. I said 7,000 yesterday. It was $9,579. So you're even more impressed today than you were yesterday.
bigger thumbs up this time and bigger round. Okay, Randy West makes a point that every time you put a name on any disorder, there's people who line up to the doctors to get it fixed because I've got that disorder. Me too.
That disorder is called what is it? What do you call somebody who thinks they're sick all the time? Uh,
Kleptomania? No, not
no,
no.
kleptomaniac.
I
You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, I know what you mean. I can't remember the name. Yep.
yeah. Oh Jesus!
Hypochon- hypochondriac, isn't it?
Hypochondriac. Yes, that's it. Hypochondriac. Well,
Yeah.
that person has a mental disorder called hypochondria. That get that. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Peter Biker. Yeah, I don't know what I had a that was my mental disorder today. I couldn't think of the mental disorder called hypochondria.
A persecution.
That,
Peter also points out a persecution complex may be the healthiest response to an unaddressed injustice.
yes. Anyway, well, and I think we kind of flogged this out, but I just wanted to bring that up. That and I believe that modern living is causing a lot of problems with people.
Yeah.
A lot of isolation, people withdrawing, people finding the world on a TV screen. They don't want to go in a room where the people are actually physical, where they might smell bad or smell like cologne or bump into you physically or whatever. I think that we're becoming more and more antisocial, and I think the social medias and stuff like that. You pretty well, I think you should be trained in school as how to deal with social media because it is an addictive thing. It will, it will draw you in, and it's actually made that way because it is. Now I wrote them down here if I can find out what I wrote. It oh no, yeah, I think it's basically what it does is it excites the reward part of your brain more often than not. In other words, social media, and I'll see it myself when I go through YouTube. For instance, let's say I'm searching sort of right-wing type of news to see how they deliver it, which I'll do. Then I'll just get more and more right-wing news all the time. And then I have to actually go and physically search because that will be the offering over and over again. Then I have to go and search left-wing news. So then I'll go to Democracy Now! Or something like that. And then I'll just get waves and waves and waves of that because social media is trying to decide what I like, and it's gonna let me gorge on that if I want to.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to do is search for a variety of different attitudes and opinions on the same news source.
Well, and the same sort of thing is also true when you think about it, where you do a Google search, you do a Google search, I don't know, just about any topic that you want, and how that topic comes up time and again on your Facebook one. But let's say that you did an Amazon search on something for a new device that you wanted. So you went out and you bought your new cup on Amazon. Now for the next month, you're going to see cup adverts on Facebook.
Well, yeah, but that's less of a problem basically than the other what I'm talking about is social media will feed you what it thinks you want, and
yes, I know.
It will let you gorge on it, and so you will get a lot of satisfaction, instant satisfaction, or and then you're kind of stuck in its loop. And what social media is trying to do is trying to feed you the stuff it wants you to feed it, so it can make as much money as it can off you. It's kind of like it's kind of like an advanced Fox News or CNN. Like Fox will find a demographic, and it will feed that demographic the kind of news. Like they like to scare you. They like to tell you that the world's coming to the end. That there's that Kamala Harris is a communist that's going to turn the country over to communist institute. That kind of thing, and it will find a demographic that it can speak to, and so people always will go back to Fox News because they get what they want. They get the drama that they want, and the reaffirmation in their mind that the world is coming to an end.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing because, in fact, you do get that kind of thing. And for example, if you pick up on a headline that says Trump is 3 points ahead on the polls, and you kind of follow that, and then you kind of come back and you look for more information about the same thing, you'll be convinced that hey, Trump's a million miles ahead of Harris on the polls. But then you come across another day a thing that says, Harris is 4 points ahead on the polls, and you follow that story, and then you come across a whole wealth of things that lead you in another direction entirely.
Well, it depends a lot on the network, but the whole point of the matter is, if you look up at social media, you'll get poll after poll after poll that is right wing or left wing, depending on what social media is trying to figure out what you are, and it's collecting all kinds of information on you, and that's the problem. It is up to us to get a variety of different takes on the news, and I find that that's a big problem in North America. There is and like I said, the amount of news out there is like a smorgasbord. But anyway, let's get off of social media, and where are we going?
Right. Macron is basically calling for a ban on arms sales to Israel.
Well, remember that the British tepidly reduced the amount of arms going to Israel by 8%. That was supposed to be a signal to Israel that they're overdoing it. Macron has stepped up and said no more weapons for Israel. France, of course, does not give Israel a whole lot of weapons. But this has ignited something, and of course, Bibi Netanyahu has flipped right out, calling this outrageous, demanding that France turn us back on Israel, and it's not helping them with their fight for civilization, of which he's characterized it for.
Yeah,
we are the representing civilization, and the Arabs are the Arabs and the Iranians are representing anti-civilization, I guess.
Yeah.
How long will it go on is my question. And obviously, the French have stood up, and this is particular because of Lebanon, and they've had historical interests in Lebanon, having once been the colonial ruler of Lebanon.
Yeah.
This is, of course, I don't know. It appears that the Israelis are trying to make a parking lot out of Beirut like they did Gaza, or, well, a rubble heap like they did Gaza. This is the big question. Israel seems to be continually trying to goad the U.S. and Iran into a war. Now, this is a question. Now, I've talked about the weakness of Joe Biden and how he seems to be slapped around and embarrassed continually by Bibi Netanyahu. But there's another school of thought that says that actually Israel is doing exactly what the U.S. wants to do, but can't say it wants to do. That Israel is actually the U.S.'s attack dog, and they're doing what the U.S. can't say that it wants to do, but it can facilitate Israel. It can facilitate them with money, diplomatic protection, and even, well, obviously they work with them with their intelligence networks. They guide them to the targets and all that other stuff. So that there is that other school of thought that says that actually Biden is not as dumb as he looks, and that that Israel is doing what the United States wants them to do. That they're just the attack dog of the United States, where the United States can take a position like we're trying to get peace and all that. But notice peace never comes.
Yep.
Peace never comes month after month. And 1 year on in Gaza, 1 year long, and they're still killing children and maiming children, and they still haven't defeated Hamas. How come? As a matter of fact, Hamas shot rockets out of Gaza into Israel, which is unthinkable. You think, how could they possibly do that after a year of IDF marching up and down the country, blowing up everything they could possibly find? 70% of the buildings are ruined. I really can't see how. Well, finally, the French have shut off the tap, but they didn't have much in the tap to begin with.
Yeah, that's true.
I just cannot understand how this thing keeps going on. How children how like it's 40% of those that have died and been maimed in Gaza right now are children, and that's not counting the ones that are under the rubble. There's some people think there's thousands of people under the rubble that are dead and just rotting away in there.
Yeah.
Randy West, Israel's discontent will continue forward until Israel gains what they desire as their homeland. Yeah, a greater Israel. Yeah, that's the big thing. When people talk about the the uh, the river to the sea, the first river to the sea comment was from the Likud party or from the Zionists, who said from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the sea, should be Israeli, complete Jewish ethnic religious state. The river to the sea for the Palestinians, for most Palestinians, means freedom of Palestinians in there. But I'm sure there's a few of them that think they're going to just push the Jewish state into the sea and take over. I mean that's dumb, but some do think that. Two sentences and they're both true. Well, both are false. Yeah. Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah.
But
That is that's part of the the dichotomy we have with this war, isn't it?
I think of the people of Gaza every day. Now I'm thinking of the people in like the everyday dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not the Hamas fighter, not the Israeli IDF guys. I'm just the regular everyday person. And what kind of misery has been brought upon them by the machinations of Zionists and Islamists and all the other things? I don't find that the Jewish settler movement is just as much of a terrorist group as any, but it has the protection of the Israeli army. I don't know, and the apparent weakness of the United States leadership in this. I mean, apparently Joe Biden hasn't talked to Bibi Netanyahu in months. Things can get right out of hand unless Joe kind of shakes himself into reality here. You can't go. You can't. Yeah. You are an accomplice millions for thousands of people being injured and died and suffering, Joe. And you know the Israelis are not letting enough food and water into that area, Joe. Go ahead.
But he's only got 4 months left in his reign.
Well, I think the one thing he could do for Kamala, if Kamala wins, and that's quite doubtful right now because we don't know who's going to win the election. It looks as if she might pull off a squeaker, but who knows? Trump might do the same. It's kind of like a tie like that right now.
I think you're going to see. I think in this election you're going to see something unusual happen, but that's another matter.
The idea of the assassinations things are still out there. I don't think. I think Kamala Harris is just as much vulnerable as Donald Trump is, and
yeah.
I think that the assassination thing is out there, that the United States is so divided, they're going to have extremists come out and try to take a shot at any one of them. But whatever the case, Joe Biden can at the end of the election, whether or not Kamala or Trump wins in November 6th, at that particular point, he can withdraw the weapons from Israel, or at least use his leverage then, and it won't affect the election. Right now, I'm afraid. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that he's going to people are going to let thousands more children die and become maimed in this or starve because you got to wait till the election. Because if you make a move now, it might affect the election. That's sickening.
Right. Yeah, it is. Peter Biker makes a thing. My best conversations each day are found right here on Talking Niagara. What a great way to start my day. Thanks again, guys, in the chat. Until next time.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. That's
Great
a
time.
great endorsement. Thank you.
Right. Well, we try our best, and the thing was that I think it's important that you take a different viewpoint, because I'm not not never have been a fan of, we get these one-sided stories, and yes, we know that Jews suffered mightily under Hitler, under the Holocaust. But again, now we've got a situation whereby there seems to be a Jewish-led Holocaust here of those people living in Gaza. And yes, I know that
Precisely.
Hamas started it.
Yes, but it wasn't. It didn't start in a vacuum, just like
Yes,
Guterres has said it
exactly.
was.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
these are radicalized people. Nobody could condone what they did, but nobody could condone what is happening daily in the West Bank and by the settler movement as they burn a house or beat up a kid. I saw a kid that was kind of like throwing a stone at Israeli soldiers, but he was so far away he'd never hit them. And yet this kid standing by himself throwing stones towards these soldiers that were standing on the street, I mean, he could only make it halfway to the soldiers, and they shot him dead.
Yeah.
A kid in his teens by himself in the street throwing stones, like, I guess the kid was a little uh, mentally disabled in a way. Was it uh, and like he was like a special kid basically, and he was throwing these stones, and of course they weren't getting anywhere near the soldiers, but they shot him dead anyway. I mean, there's a handful, several soldiers there, and they've got guns and body armor, and this kid's throwing stone at him from too far of a distance for them to even get close to him. The kid's solitary kid in the street by himself, and it was open area too. It wasn't like there was buildings on each side of the street, and they gunned him down. It's on TV. It's
Yeah.
disgusting.
It is. It is disgusting. It's not something. It's not the images that we want to see. And
What do you think happened to that soldier?
Yeah.
What do you think happened to the soldier? Well, there's nothing we can do. It was an accident. Like that that young Turkish American woman that got shot in the head with a sniper's bullet. What did Joe Biden say? Oh, it ricocheted off the ground. It was an accident. A sniper bullet ricocheting off the ground.
Ricocheting off the ground is not. There's no such thing as ricocheting off the ground.
Yeah, and what is a sniper shooting into an unarmed crowd 200 meters away that is not even, they're demonstrators, but they're not even demonstrating at the time? It's BS. It's just like the Palestinian Christian American journalist that took a bullet in the head. That was an accident too. I don't know.
We've had too many accidents.
There is a prejudice in. We talk about anti-Semitism, but there is a strong prejudice in the U.S. and the West against Palestinian Arabs. There just is. They're children of a lesser God. Well, there's absolutely nothing we can do about that. Oh well, the Israelis are investigating that. That's what I like when I watch these press conferences. Oh, our counterparts in Israelis are investigating that. Our counterparts in Israel are investigating that, and they, and if they say, well, I don't know, it's just maddening to me that we are so one-sided.
We're 1 year into this war.
1 year. This war was supposed to end in a matter of months. Remember?
Yeah.
It's a year long.
1 year into this war, and it's not going to. There's no signs of it really ending. And now they've tagged Lebanon on there, and hey, of course, with the Israeli army, the 40 kilometers to that river that they've talked about, maximum 40 kilometers. Well, they must have reached there already.
The Latani River. Yeah, they're doing.
Yeah,
They're going to
Latani
do it.
River.
They're going to do a marine assault too. Apparently, they're telling everybody to get out of there. Of course, the fear among a lot of people is they're trying to get them out of there. Well, yeah, okay, get out of there so and come back later, but they're not going to let them back in later. That's what people suspect. If the Israelis are successful in their southern Lebanon incursion, they'll keep that land and keep other people out of it.
Yeah,
for their greater Israel. Unfortunately, this just absolutely continues on. And what are we being told all the time too? Now, when that Russia-Ukrainian war started, everybody was saying, "Oh, we're putting huge sanctions on Russia. They can never be able to sustain this war. Impossible." And I remember the words like that. Impossible. Boy, did Russia really get itself paint itself into a corner. It'll never be able to supply itself with weapons. It'll never, the whole social order will collapse because of sanctions and all that. That's 3 years in.
Yeah.
What happened to those predictions?
Yeah, and Putin is as strong as ever.
He's winning the war. He's winning the war inch by inch, but he's still winning the war. It's time for that to come to an end. Something. I said this from the very beginning. This was a war that need not have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a war that need not happen, and both of these are wars that have other solutions.
Yeah, that's the one thing that that Trump says that I like. So I don't know how genuine he is, but he did say, when asked about the war, who do you want to win, the Russians or the Ukrainians? He says, I want the dying to stop. I want it to stop.
Exactly.
I want the dying to stop.
See, that actually, of all of the things that Trump said, of all of the things that was in that debate, I want the dying to stop, is actually the one thing that I think was genuine by both by either party. And, I get that Trump wants the dying to stop.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if once he gets into office, if he looks at whatever is happening, he can just absolutely do it. But I don't know. I don't know whether he's going to get in or not. He's just has got just as good a chance as Kamala right now, Harris.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's stop the dying. And I've said that over and over on this show. Stop this war.
Randy asked a question: is there ever any war that ought to have happened? That's a fair question.
Well, the Second World War couldn't have been avoided. Obviously, that couldn't
that's
have.
Probably the only one.
State like that.
Yeah, that's probably the only one. Yeah.
But the First World War could have been avoided.
Yeah.
That was probably the worst sin of all time, is starting that war, the useless, piggish war that it was, that got everybody all jingoed out and ready to go to war, and in the end, it was just meaningless.
Okay. So coming back local, are more operators of gambling facilities coming to Niagara Falls? We talked about this last week, but in fact, he's been talking about. Mayor Jim Diodati has been talking about it with multiple governments, multiple ministers, and he's saying finally somebody's listening. So we got 15 years about this.
It's 8:04, so I think we should do that for tomorrow.
We'll do that for tomorrow. Yeah.
Now there's another aspect of that. The reason why I posted it is because I wanted to bring up statistics about problem gamblers. No casino makes money unless it has problem gamblers.
Yeah. All right.
And I'll get into
that. I wasn't keeping an eye on the time.
Okay, with further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.